Visit Sailrite.com for all your project supplies, tools, and instructions. In this tutorial video, we will show you how to make V-Berth cushions for a boat. We will transform this berth using a more comfortable foam combination and brand new Outdura upholstery fabric from Sailrite. Outdura is a solution-dyed acrylic performance fabric which is highly UV resistant and stain resistant. It will last for years and can be used both indoors and outdoors. For maximum comfort, we layered the foam with a soft on top and a firm on the bottom, which helps prevent bottoming out, and then moisture prevention underlayment, which is an innovative mesh material designed to promote constant airflow underneath your mattress, minimizing characteristics of condensation, mold, and mildew growth.
Hi, I'm Eric Grant with Sailrite. I am in a V-Berth, and these are the old cushion covers. We're doing a redo of this boat, and I'm trying to assess whether or not the foam needs to be replaced. It's fairly soft, but I do feel the bottom with my hip, and so we might replace the foam. When we take the covers off, we'll assess it and tell you why we didn't replace the foam. But we're going to show you the entire process of how to make V-Berth cushions.
In this first chapter, we'll pattern the V-Berth using Durascrim pattern material.
So I've laid down Durascrim pattern material, and I've cut it oversized using the old cushions as a reference to how big to cut it. And you can see that I have several inches over the edge. I'm just going to use painter's tape, and I'm going to tape it in a few spots to make sure it doesn't move while I do the patterning. I'm going to start marking because I've got this pretty flat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Sharpie marker, and I'm just going to mark the edge like this.
The goal in patterning for cushions is to mark the desired finished size on your pattern material. We will add a little bit of extra size to the foam for a perfect fit later on. The starboard and port walls may not be perfectly vertical. They may have an angle to them. That's called a wedge. We're going to show how to deal with that now.
So what I'm using here is a clear acrylic ruler, and I place it along the edge to figure out the wedge. Now we know that our foam is going to be 4 inches. So at 4 inches, what is the distance there? And what I get right here is 7/8 of an inch. So what I do is I take my marker and I mark right here, and then I write 7/8 of an inch. That's my wedge at 4 inches. And we want to do that or check around the perimeter because sometimes boats aren't the same. So about every foot or so, I'm going to check again and mark it if it's different. So let's see what this is. At 4 inches, it's the same. I'll go ahead and mark it there. Now, here, it doesn't seem like there's much of a wedge, but there's a small one. And whether or not it's worth doing is debatable. So let's get the measurement here first. I'm trying to do this with one hand on the deck. As you know, spaces are tight like this. So see, look, at 4 inches, this one's what? A 1/4 inch. Probably not worth doing here. 7/8 is worth it, but there it's not. So our wedge is going to stop right here. Let's check on this starboard side all the way across every foot or so, and then we'll do the port side in the same manner. This one's 1 inch.
When you're measuring your wedge, if your wedge is less than an inch, you may want to consider not making a wedge at all because usually the cushion will fit nicely without it, and it also simplifies the cushion making process. Here you can see the pattern is all done. We've marked the wedge on both starboard and port sides. Now our wedge is about an inch and we could forego making it, but we want to show the process, so we're going to go ahead and show it in this video. Be sure to label on the pattern material starboard out, which is sout on the starboard side, and pout for port out on the port side.
Before we take the pattern out, I should have marked where this wall is. This is probably going to be the center, but I'm just going to mark it wall so we can make a determination on the loft table. Actually, the wall starts right here, not between those bolts. So I'll put X's on that one.
To provide comfort and also support so we never bottom out, we're going to layer the foam.
We are assessing the foam here, and we've taken it out of one of the cushions, and they actually did us a favor by marking it. This is means that the density, 18, is so it's a 1.8 density, and it's a 36 IFD. This is the top side. It's actually labeled top side. And this is the bottom side, and this is a 1.8 25 IFD. So they put the softer foam on the bottom side, and this is an OEM. The OEM did this. Basically, they just put the foam on to add for the thickness. Usually you put a softer foam on the top and a firmer foam on the bottom. So is the foam in good shape, and does it have any mold or mildew? No, it doesn't feel bottomed out, but it's definitely super soft. So we're going to replace the foam with a high density foam. Density has to do with longevity, and I consider anything a 2.3 or below a medium density, or even a low density if it goes even lower. Our foam is going to be a 2.8. This is high density Sailrite foam from Sailrite, and we're going to layer it with a firm on the bottom. This is the firm, and a soft on top, so that you won't bottom out and you'll still have the comfort of the soft. Now here at Sailrite, we can't sell foam that's been damaged in manufacturing, but we can use it in our videos here because nobody will ever feel this when we glue these two together. So don't be alarmed by this cut. You will get a piece of foam that won't have that, but we're trying to save some bucks here. So we need to glue this soft to the top side of this firm, and that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to use Sailrite foam and fabric adhesive. This stuff's great. This can's been used several times, and watch the nozzle. Comes out immediately. I don't have to clean the nozzle. Oftentimes with 3M glues, I almost always have to clean the nozzle every time that I have let it sit for a while. So I love this stuff. What we want to do is we want to coat both surfaces thoroughly too. So I will not only go in this direction, I will go in this direction over the top as well, because we want this to be a permanent bond. Okay, so I put the soft down and I sprayed it, and I have a second helper here. Now you do have a little bit of working time, but we're going to try to put it on fairly even, Bill. And so I'm putting the firm on top right now. Doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to cut it. Yes. Just has to be close. This side's going to be the bottom side. Thank you, Bill, very much. Again, you won't have this, but I'm going to actually beef it up by gluing the sides, letting it tack up. That's one thing I didn't talk about. You want this to tack up before you bond it permanently. So I'm going to let some air get to it for a while, and then we'll bond this together. 3M specialty adhesive remover can be put on a rag to basically work up any overspray, because I did get a little bit on my table. So I'm just going to go over the table a little bit with a rag to make sure I don't have any excess residue on the table.
We'll be using that pattern to cut the foam to a desired size.
If you remember right, this is the wall. This is basically the entryway for this cushion, and this is where we're going to split it. Now you could split it almost anywhere, but I think that makes sense. So I'm going to put a straight edge right there on that, and then I'm going to pull the fabric so that I get the rest of it on the tabletop at the top here without moving that. And I'm going to extend this because this is obviously not long enough, and we want to find the middle of this. The middle of 13 is 6.5. This is a wedge measurement, so I'm going to mark this at middle. I'm going to extend this by putting it on here. It's actually right on that center line, which is perfect, which means I can just strike a line here, and I can follow the line here all the way to the bottom edge. Okay, so when I put a straight edge on here, you can see it deviates a little bit, and when I marked the pattern, it was pretty rough. But we do want to make the foam a 1/4 inch larger than the opening on all sides. So this is about a 1/4 inch. I'm going to strike a line here. That being straight would be good. This over here is a wedge, but we're going to add a 1/4 inch to it, and we're going to add a 1/4 inch here. Here in the middle, we're going to do that, but we can't do that on the pattern because we're going to cut that there. So let's see what this one looks like. Yeah, it's kind of roughly done, but I'm going to just kind of balance it out. So that looks like it's going to be a little bit bigger and is definitely a straighter application. So right there, and we'll do this all around the perimeter. Now I'm marking in advance here that we need to add a 1/4 inch on both sides of this line after it's cut. And you can see that we basically straightened out the line everywhere. Here I did measure a little bit of a wedge, but this is at the head. We're not going to do that, so I'm going to take that off here. So now it's time to cut this out, and we're going to cut on our lines that we struck. And right now this one has the 1/4 inch, that's why we didn't add any more. I know it doesn't look like a 1/4 inch here, we faired it out, but it should work great. I've laid my pattern material on my foam, and the soft side is up. Make sure the correct side is up, and on my pattern is up as well. Now, what I need to calculate for, and that's why I haven't marked anything yet, is I have a 1-inch wedge, and we've already added the 1/4 inch to it. So I need to make sure that I have 1 inch of extra fabric, which I do, of extra foam, I'm sorry, and I need to add a 1/4 inch to this side. So I need at least 1 1/4, and I have more than that here. So we want to verify that. We're good there as well. And we also need to add a 1/4 inch here, which this is, well, yeah, it's almost at a 1/4 inch now. I might actually move it over so I don't have to cut it at all. And then where else? Over here. So I need a 1-inch wedge here, definitely have plenty. Now this 7/8 I'm going to transfer to 1 inch because I'm not going to calculate for that. It's so close to 1 inch. So this is where my wedge stops, and it looks like I have 1 inch exactly. So I'm actually good. Now what about this, you may be asking. It doesn't fit perfectly. So what we're going to do after this is cut is we're going to probably slice this off, re-put our patterns on top, and glue some foam to this. This is a rough edge, so we need to make it smooth again. So don't worry about that right now. We'll deal with that later. So what I've done here is I've made this exactly a 1/4 inch by putting my pattern material on that, because we need to add a 1/4 inch. And this, it's hard to cut an edge that has so little foam. And I'm using multi-use pins, and I'm going to push it all the way down. And I've never done this before, but we're going to experiment with this. And that way nothing will move on us. So I'm just going to put them every 24 inches or so down all the sides. Okay, we had 7/8. We're going to make it 1 inch, and we want to mark some marks at 1 inch. This one's going to be a 1/4 inch, so I'm going to just put a mark there, and a 1/4 inch here. We're going to do 1 inch here, and then we'll eventually strike a line. Now, don't forget this one either. This is a 1-inch wedge, 1-inch wedge here, no wedge here. Now when we get to, where's that one that's really weird? Oh, the wedge that stops here. So this is the wedge that stops, and we're right at 1 inch. So I'm going to put it there, and here, and then how do we transfer this? Okay, so this is a wedge that stops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go over here to my pattern, hold that there, and strike it to here. I know that seems weird, but it's really not going to make much difference at all. This is a rounded corner, and it goes into a 1-inch wedge. So what I do is I just follow the contour of the corner, and I carry it out to the wedge like that. My cameraman said this looks like a lot more than 1 inch, and it is. It's because I ran out of pattern material. You can see my mark basically stopped here because I didn't have it on there correctly, so I took an imaginary line from there. This is the Sailrite blade foam saw. It has a stationary blade and one blade that moves, so it works really well for this, and it has a base with rollers. Look at that beautiful cut. So you may be saying, what about the wedge? Well, we're going to cut that in after we cut the straight cut here. So we'll show you that later on. Don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Now you'll notice that this side we didn't mark on the foam. We actually pinned the pattern material on with multi-use pins, and you can do it that way too. So watch how this cuts. So we need to add a foam chunk here. So I'm going to just pull these two pins and put them back here and fold the material back. We're going to chop this off and we're going to do the same thing with this one so that we can add foam. We can't obviously glue it to an edge that looks like that. So I'm spraying both surfaces. I already cut a piece of each of the foams and glued them together. And now we just want to coat the ends. You can do this for any kind of foam application if you're short. You can glue sections together, even of your waist, and nobody's going to feel it. Now we need to wait for it to get tacky, which is a couple of minutes. It's tacky. Make sure the soft is up, and it's wrong right now. Whoops, that would have been bad. This is a soft. So we fold our pattern material back over each of these pieces, pin it, and then we'll continue to cut it. And you've got plenty of foam now.
In this chapter, we're going to be cutting the wedge into the edge of your foam.
So our wedge stops here. I accidentally marked it there. It stops right there. And we have a 1-inch wedge all across here, only on this side of the foam. So I'm going to flip this over so that we have the bottom side, which is the firm foam, is sticking up now. And our wedge is on this side. So now I'm taking my clear acrylic ruler, and we have a 1-inch wedge, so we're just going to put a 1-inch line on the side. This is the bottom side. Transfer that right there. So I have some weighted sandbags. You can use anything to weight it down. And I have this edge against the table, so right up against the table. Here's where I need to cut off. So this is my wedge. So what I'm going to do is use my foam saw. You can also use an electric kitchen knife. And I'm going to actually put it right at the edge of the table here and in this crux right here. And then I'm going to do this. And that works pretty well. Now notice I didn't get it all the way down here. That's not going to be a big deal. So what I probably should have done to get this all the way out, not that it's going to matter, is just move the foam a little bit away from the table, more away from this edge, and that would have chopped it off all the way to that edge. But I think that's perfect. Now we just have to do that to the other foam piece, and we'll continue on.
We'll be using the foam to cut the top and bottom plate. That's next.
I flipped it so the top side of our foam is down on top of the decorative fabric, and it's nice and flat, and I have plenty of fabric all around. So we're in good shape. So I'm going to use the Sailrite Edge hot knife with the precision blade and cutting foot, and this will seal the edge of the fabric. And it also walks right beside the foam because we want this to be basically the same size as the foam. Now you may say, oh, look, it's an 1/8 inch off. Not a big deal. So you can use this to make short work of this instead of marking and then cutting if you've got this hot knife and blade. We designed the hot knife so that the screws would be on one side and there are no screws over here, so I typically like to cut against foam, obviously with the screws out, and sometimes I angle it depending on the thickness of the foam. So that's how I get a great cut like this and a sealed edge. Okay, now we have our cushion underlining, and we flipped the foam to the bottom side, and we need to make sure that it's on there all the way here. Okay, so this is a cushion underlining material. You can kind of see through it. It's a vinyl. It's a little bit on the sticky side, so it helps to hold cushions in place. I don't want to use a hot knife on this because it's a vinyl, so you can either mark it and then cut it with scissors. That's probably what we're going to do. So I'm using a white scribe ball because this is a black cushion underlining. We have other colors as well, and we want this to be basically the same size as the bottom of our foam. Remember, this one has a wedge, and it's also irregular, so you need to make sure you pattern so that the foam is bottom down. Okay, we can just cut this with scissors. These are really nice scissors, though Sailrite does carry quite a few scissors. If your lines are slightly askew, just straighten it out as you cut. So the decorative fabric is, I'm going to mark in on it because nobody's going to see that. And then this is the cushion underlining, and I mark in on it so we know what's the right side and what's the wrong side. Now this fabric is Outdura upholstery fabric. It's 100% solution dyed acrylic, and it lasts in the sun, doesn't fade hardly at all. It's water and stain resistant. It's a great fabric available from Sailrite.
For added breathability for our Cushionrite foam, we're going to add moisture prevention underlining.
We're using the moisture prevention fabric on the bottom side. This is a really cool material. You can go all the way through it. It has basically a structure. If you look from the side, you can see kind of like a fibers that help hold it up. So this provides great breathability for cushions. And I'm just using a scribe ball. We want it to be a little bit smaller than the size of the foam. So I'm just going to trace around the foam, and this is the bottom side of the foam that's facing down. Now I'm just going to cut on the inside of this white line that we did with the scribe ball, and it will leave quite a bit of fibers like this on the tabletop, but don't worry about that. We are going to put this inside of the cushion cover as a backer for breathability.
Our boxing is a seamed corner type of boxing. We're going to cut it into strips next.
Okay, the question is, do we do a continuous boxing or seamed corner boxing? Well, continuous boxing, obviously you have to have the zipper plaque be separate, but it doesn't have seams at the corners, but requires a lot more fabric. So usually for cushions that are this large, we do seamed corners because it saves you money. Prevention underlining, and we are going to add it to the bottom side of the cushion. I know this is the top side, but we need to take this into account when we measure for our boxing height. If I lay that on top of the thickness of my foam, I get 4.5 inches for my boxing, and I need to add a 1/2 inch to that. So we're going to cut our boxing strips to 5 inches. And then if you measure the zipper, because we have to do a zipper plaque boxing width that's different, our zipper measures 1.25 inches that we're using. So we need to add 1.25 inches to the 5 inches, making our zipper plaque boxing 6.25 inches. I'm constantly asked about seam allowance and why we only add a 1/2 inch to the boxing height. Well, we want the cushions to be nice, or we want the cushion covers to be nice and tight. If we added more, then you might get wrinkles in the top. We want it to compress the foam. So after we take away the 1/4 inch on the top of the boxing and the 1/4 inch on the bottom, our foam that is basically 4.5 inches will be 4 inches for a nice compression. So that's why we only add a 1/2 inch. Now a wedge, which this is, often will be longer than your regular boxing. So you can take a measuring device and measure up, and you can see it's 4.25. And our moisture prevention fabric will add a 1/2 inch to that, so it'd actually be 4.75 in height. Depending on the depth of the wedge, this could be even wider, so you may have to cut separate boxing to include for wedges. Since ours is only 0.25 difference, we're going to cut this wedge exactly the same as the standard boxing height.
To estimate the length of the boxing required, measure each one of the sides with a soft tape measure and write those measurements down. These are the measurements for our cushion, rounded up a few inches each on each side, so we have excess. We're going to use the foam to cut it to the exact length that we required later on.
So I've used this fabric for my other port side cushion, and this edge is already hot knifed. So what my boxing is going to be 5 inches, all of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my clear acrylic ruler. This marks fairly well on it. This is the chalk pen, and it can be seen. You should always test whatever fabric marking pencil that you're using. See, it's not that vivid, but it's enough that I can cut it with a hot knife. So we're going to cut multiple strips down this running length of fabric. So I'll put one on top and then probably a third one. So the width of zipper that I have is 1.25 inches from edge to edge. This is the Lin Zip number 5. So that means I need to make that boxing strip 6¼ inches, because 5 inches plus the 1¼ is 6¼ So I'm going to mark it here for this strip, and then just mark it down a few times, and then take a straight edge and chalk a line. Now you may notice that when you use a straight edge with upholstery fabric, sometimes some of your lines, like these two lines are pretty much on top of each other, this one's a little bit off. Sometimes you have to take your fingernails and do this to straighten out the fabric a little bit, because it can be askew because it's rather soft. So now to add a zipper, I need to split this in half. This is my zipper plaque boxing. So for us, that's a 3 1/8. So I'm going to strike lines in the middle, and then we'll strike another line there as well. Now I'm just going to use a Sailrite edge hot knife to make sure the edges do not unravel, and we'll cut out all of the boxing strips right on our lines.
Now we'll take that boxing and cut it to the exact size we need to match the plate edges.
So here's my top plate, and for any edges that are straight that don't have a wedge edge, in other words an angled edge, we can actually just line up the edge together so it's flush, and make sure inside surfaces are facing each other. This would be the inside if it had a right side and a wrong side, and this would be the inside surface. And then just take a little clip and clip it here instead of measuring, and then this also ensures that it's exactly the same length as that edge. So now that we have it clipped, I'm just going to move it, making sure that I don't let the fabric move on me, and that means that this right here is my cutoff. So I mark it there, and I'll just strike a line, and I'll cut it off with a hot knife there. So that's this piece. So with this end, you may think, oh gosh, I have to cut it so that it follows that. No, you only have to have it go to here, and then you make this line perpendicular with this edge over here. That's why we cut it like this, and it should lay like that. When you lift it up, it'll be perfectly vertical. So this is the very top, and what we'll do here, because of the wedge, there's a wedge over here, we're going to match this up. I'm going to strike a line here. This side doesn't have a wedge, so it'll be cut basically perpendicular to the cut edge. So I strike a line here, like that, and then what I do with here is I take my bottom plate and I measure it, or what I could do is actually do this, put this right here on this edge, like that, and then this, I'm gonna make it flush. I did that so you could see it. This is where I want to cut to. So what I'm going to do is take my clear acrylic ruler, go right to that corner and right to that chalk mark, and this is the wedge. We're just going to cut this with a hot knife, and this one. So remember, this is the longer edge. Whatever matches up to this top edge is what's supposed to be clipped here. So it'll be clipped on just like that, so we can remember exactly how it gets sewn together, and I'll just clip it in place.
We'll now take the boxing that we created for the zipper plaque, sew in a zipper, and then make pockets for the end of the slider to slide into. Here's a look at the finished cushion. This is where the wedged edge transitions to a vertical edge. The boxing takes a slight turn here and includes a wedge, but we made a single length piece for this zippered edge. The top and the bottom plate shapes will help pull the boxing to take the turn and the wedge nicely, as you can see. With that said, let's go ahead and make the zipper plaque boxing.
So this is our zipper plaque boxing. It doesn't have the zipper sewn in. We just want a couple extra inches here. We're actually going to be cutting it down to size and adding a pocket on it, but there's no reason to waste zippers. So you just want a couple inches extra at each end. We'll verify that that's the case, and then I'll show you what to do to sew the zipper in. Okay, my zipper is 1 1/4. So that means I need to strike a line at 1 1/4 so that I can fold this over to that line. Make sure you hold it. Remember, the fabric doesn't have a firm hand, so it can wander while you're striking your line. So we're going to do that on this piece. Next, we're going to take a 1/4 inch seam stick for canvas and upholstery and run it down this edge. This is the edge we just measured the 1 1/4 inch on. And we're also going to do the same thing on this inner edge where we measured 1 1/4 inches. Now this is an acrylic based glue. Don't use a rubber based glue, they yellow in the sun. This is the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler, and definitely you want to push down hard with some hard object like this on both strips, because the acrylic does not allow the glue to stick very well, and this helps a lot. Once that's done, we're going to choose one of them, it doesn't matter which, and we're going to create a hem on one of them first. So I'm going to peel off this transfer paper all the way to the end. And then I'm going to come back to the beginning, and we're going to fold right to that chalk line all the way down this length. Once it's folded, we're going to use the Sailrite canvas patterning ruler to adhere it down well. There is no right side or wrong side to a molded tooth. This is a Linzip number 5 molded tooth zipper continuous. We're going to put the 1/4" seam stick for canvas down both edges close to the raw edge. We don't want it to be too close to the zipper. So we're going to go down this side and that side in the same manner, making the same length as this, or a little bit longer. I'm going to peel off one side, and we'll just stop here. And this is the side that's hemmed, and I'm going to leave some excess zipper hanging over the edge, and I'm going to baste it on so the teeth are right in the center, okay? And if you've done it right, if you look at the other side, then this will basically be lined up with the flange of the fabric. But I like to do it from the top side, that way I make sure that it's exactly in the center, and then I just press down. And we're not going to do the other side, we're just going to baste this one on, and then we're going to sew it. Then we'll do the other side. So let's do this, and I'll show you what to do with the sewing machine. This is a scrap piece from our other cushion that we've already sewn, and you can't see the stitch, at least you can't see the knot, but you can on this side. So what I want to do is I want to set tension. I've already got the tension set appropriately, but what you want to do is you want to sew with something like a scrap zipper, and I'll just sew a little bit off the side so you can see your tension on the bottom. So the zipper's on the bottom, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew a little bit, and we'll stop here and lift this out. And what we want, because you can ruin a whole upholstery piece by having too much upper tension. So what you want is you want to see that knot on the bottom side a little bit. See that little knot? That's important. If you don't see that knot, then you're going to get puckering, and it'll shrink up your canvas pretty drastically. So if the knot were on the top, if the knot were not visible here, then I would back off the upper tension. If the knot's on the bottom side, you're good. Okay, because everything is basted in place, I'm going to put the fold down and sew right against these teeth. And I don't need to do any reversing because we're going to actually sew it together here. And I want my stitch to be really close to those teeth, so I'm going to move my needle to the right because the teeth are at the right. And we'll just sew down here, and you can do this pretty quickly. We just hemmed this other side, and I peeled off the transfer paper. I'll start so this is even, and I basically just put it right to that edge, closing up that middle section, and baste it down. And we do this all the way down its length. If you've done it right, it should equal the width of our other boxing, which was 5 inches, which is perfect. If it doesn't, and if it's too short, you may have to do it over. If it's too long, you can trim both sides off a little bit. We're going to take it to the machine, and we're going to sew it with this side up in the same manner that we did on this side. I am going to mark 3 inches from the edge approximately. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 inches. And I need to cut this so that it's straight. If it's off like this, don't worry about that. One side was sewn on a little bit different than the other. As I told you, zippers sometimes do odd things. Once I cut this, I'm going to use a hot knife on it eventually, but right now we're just going to cut it so it's straight. Okay, so I'm going to start this at 3 inches, and this would be outside surfaces are facing each other, and I'm going to walk it down the entire length. Not stretching much, just kind of making sure that it's flat as I go. And then when I reach this peak here, I'm going to go around it and follow the edge this way. All the way to the end. Now what I want to do is I want to mark 3 inches here as well. So I'm going to mark 3 inches here, and then I'm going to cut it there. I'm going to touch these edges with a hot knife, but I don't want to touch the teeth because I have to put my slider on still. So now I'm going to separate this, and I'm going to slide my slider on. Slider goes on, so the puller is on the outside, as you can see, and you just match it up, and voila. Now I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to move the slider about a foot or so and stop right there. Okay, because we cut it 3 inches short, the zipper plaque, we need to make sure we have plenty to make a pocket and to make up the difference and to have extra. So I'm going to cut 2 strips that are 8 inches in length. This is out of our scrap boxing, I should say. This is the right side of our zipper plaque. We're going to put it on top of this, and we're going to sew a 1/2 inch from that edge, and we're also going to take some scrap and fold it and put it over top with the fold going towards the zipper, so that reinforces the zipper. So if you'd like, you could pin this in place or baste it in place, but I'm just going to hold everything in place and sew it. So at a 1/2 inch, which is right there, needles in center position, lower the foot, sew here, do some reversing. Okay, fold this back up because it came unfolded. Make sure everything's lined up, and so. And then do some reversing. Okay, good, take that out. Now we want to create a pocket for the slider, and to do that, I turn it right side, and I fold this back so that it creates a little pocket, the 1.5 inches or so. So I have about 1.5 inches, 2 inches here, and then I do tacking stitches on the edges, okay? So this is not going to be seen because it's really close to the raw edge. It just helps to hold everything in place. Do it there, and then come over here, and we'll do it right here as well. So there's our pocket, and we'll do this exact same thing to the other end. What we did is we walked this zipper plaque boxing all the way down the length, and then I've already trimmed it so that it's even with this corner, and the other side is exactly the same. It's even with the corner on the other end. We didn't show that.
We'll now join the seamed boxing together at each one of the corners.
Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew the boxing ends together. And one nice way to do this is to take them and go outside surfaces facing each other and just put some clips on them. And we'll take clips from the other areas because the boxing is going to have to come off the plate. We'll straighten them at the machine, but this helps us to know exactly how they're sewn together. So again, outside surfaces would face each other like this, and then this one would get clipped just like that. So I put 2 clips on each piece, and then we will clip it all and take it to the machine. So we have all 4 ends clipped together. I'm going to move these aside, and we'll start with this one. And I'm only going to show this once, or maybe on the angled one as well. So we want to make sure that the ends are completely even, and we want to sew a 1/2 inch here, doing some reversing at the top and reversing at the bottom. And I'm just sewing about a 4 millimeter stitch length. I'm a 1/2 inch from the edge. So this is the one that has the wedge in it. And what I want to do is I want to follow that wedge with this. So in other words, it won't be straight over here. We're going to follow the wedge and lay it on top like that, which will give it a little bit of offset. We're going to sew the 1/2 inch at the end, reversing at the beginning and the end. We don't need to show all this now.
Sewing the boxing to the top plate is next.
This is the outside surface of the decorative fabric, or Outdura. We want to put basting tape around the entire perimeter, and to turn a corner I just usually create a little fold in it. This is the 1/4 inch seam stick for basting tape. Why do we do this? A professional wouldn't do this, but for DIYers, man, this makes it easy. So we're going to go all around the perimeter. Because it's an acrylic, we need to make sure that we press it down hard. You may be asking, why did I say a professional wouldn't do this? Well, they'd consider this a time waster because they're just so good at it. But this avoids mistakes for DIYers and makes it so simple to sew. In my opinion, it actually speeds up the process. Spread this out. This is where that wedge is. You can see that this end is shorter than the other. So we know that we have it set perfectly like this. So I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to peel up the transfer paper around this corner and probably stop right about there. I'm going to take my scissors because I need to cut relief slits, and I'm going to go right behind the stitching, no deeper than a 1/2 inch because that's our seam allowance, here and also here. So this will help it to take the turn like that. Okay, so now what I do is I put this on so that this edge is flush with this, and baste it down, and then we'll come over here and this edge should be almost flush with it. See, I'm a little bit long, so I'll peel it up a little bit. Let's put it on like that, baste it down, and then we'll go down this side. Now if I'm off at the end, I can make modifications. So this is what the corner should look like, and I'm going to baste it down here without pulling or stretching much, because I don't know exactly if I'm going to hit that corner when I get to the other side. Hopefully we will, but if you pull on the fabric, you'll probably stretch it. So don't do that, just do it gently. So at this corner, we slit it just like we did at all of them. We'll do that at all the corners, and look at this. I think this one, oh yeah, it's perfect. Okay, so we know that this is good, so I'm going to smooth it down, and I'm actually going to put a few of these clips on it at random locations just to make sure that it doesn't come apart, because the glue doesn't stick exceptionally well to an acrylic fabric, as we've talked about before. So we're going to continue around the perimeter. This one came unbasted a little bit, and if we get to the end and one's off a little bit, I'll show you how we correct it. Like this one's a little bit off here, so what I do is I just pull a little bit on the top, on the one that's a little bit short. Yeah, there we go. And that's going to work perfectly. All right, you get the idea. Okay, we were basting here and we are off. Now I could probably manipulate that in, but it's almost a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch off. So the easy way to fix this is, since we made pockets, remember we did a tacking stitch here and here, just take a seam ripper and take out those tacking stitches, and we can modify the pocket. So let me rip out the tacking stitches here and here with a seam ripper, and then I'll show you what we do. Okay, so now they're out completely. So now what I can do is I need to slit this corner. I forgot to do that. We're going to leave that in, slit there, and we're going to baste this down at the corner so that it's perfect, right there. And then I'm going to baste in this direction, and we're going to modify that pocket. That's one of the nice things about these pockets. You can make modifications like that. And I might as well just put some double-sided tape right here to make sure it stays. So now I can put my 1/2 inch magnetic guide at the 1/2 inch mark on the needle plate. Needle's in center position. We're sewing 4mm stitch length. We can start anywhere. I'm going to do a teeny bit of reversing right here. And then we're going to sew around the perimeter 1/2 inch from the edge. And as we come to each one of these clips, we'll remove them. We'll make sure that everything stays basted together. That's important. I can remove that clip as I come to it. We're coming to the corner. Okay, what I'm going to do at the corner is I'm going to bury my needle on top of my stitches, right? The needle comes up slightly, still be buried, lift my foot, rotate the fabric around like that. We're going to take this, we're going to push this up like that. We're going to sew over that tail. Everything's still matched up. Lower the foot, don't forget to do that. Sew down this side. Move the clip, keep going all the way around. This is the transition from wedge to non-wedge. It's basically just a small corner, and we just want to follow it. Just make sure that there's no wrinkle in the part that you're sewing. That's all there is to it. So we've gone ahead and sewn around the perimeter, and this fabric has a very big weave. If I pull on it, see the white flex is coming, and the cushion is going to be pretty tight. So to reinforce that, because of the large weave, this would not necessarily be required for a fabric that didn't have a weave like this. I'm going to put a top stitch in it. And I'm not going to put the top stitch in the top plate. I'm going to run my seam allowance over down to the boxing and put my top stitch in the boxing. So we can start anywhere. This thread is almost totally invisible in this fabric. If it weren't, I'd probably start in a corner, but I'm not going to worry about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my left side of my center foot right on the stitch of our first stitch. Splay the fabric apart left and right, and sew around the perimeter. I'll sew over the top of that and do reversing when I reach that again. So all I'm going to do is do this all around the perimeter. Now you want to pull both left and right as you do this. This will strengthen this fabric and cause it not to pull as hard on that stitch, pulling apart the weave. So here we're coming up to that pocket, and it's come unbasted from this side because remember we made a modification to it. But all I need to do is just flatten it, and we're coming up to a corner here. I'm going to walk right up on top of that. Splay this apart as you go. I'm going to try to keep my hands out of the way. I just spread the fabric out at the corner. Corners are they're not really tough, they just are hard to see because of the fact that your space is so small. So splay the fabric out. We're almost to that seam for that corner. I'm going to bury my needle at the seam right there. Needle coming up slightly. I'm going to lift the foot. I'm going to pull this fabric around. Then I'm going to pull the fabric left and right. There's a bump here because we're sewing in our seam allowance at the seamed corner. And we're going to lower the foot and sew down this side. And that's really all there is to sewing around a corner. Okay, I trimmed the thread at my starting point and I'm almost to it. I don't know if you can see it because the thread matches so well, but I'm sewing over top of my previous stitches by about 1 inch. And then I'll do a little bit of reversing here, and we are done.
Now sewing the bottom plate to that assembly comes next.
The inside faces the tabletop, so this is the outside underside of the underlining material. Now we take our fabric and we lay it on top so its outside surfaces are facing the outside surface of the underlining. So I got it wrong. It's got to go like this. So you should see the seams on the top, which I do see, and we're matching up the shape. Okay, good. So actually I need to move this away, and we need to put double-sided tape all around the perimeter of this, just like we did before. So I put double-sided tape on the entire perimeter. We're going to cut these corners a little bit like we did before. Make sure you don't go too deep right before the stitching. And here's another one. On the inside of the stitching, just a little bit. Okay. Now, our job is to match it up just like before. So this edge would be almost flush. It gets basted down there. This edge is almost flush, gets basted down there, and we'll run it down here. And it's the same process as it was for the top plate. So remember, we split this open and I matched up this corner, and all you got to do is just fold this until it takes up the excess fabric and baste it down. This is our last side, and hopefully it's going to match up. It looks like I do have a little bit of modification if I need to. I've got it basted everywhere up to this point, and I think it's going to come out pretty nice here. Let's see, do I have any extra fabric? No, it's almost perfect. If you do have extra fabric, sometimes you can just kind of work it in as long as you do it gradually. I think I'm in good shape. Yeah, nice. So we've clipped all around the perimeter just to make sure that everything stays in place. I'll do a teeny bit of reversing here. So now we're sewing the boxing onto the bottom plate. And let me show you what I do when I get to a corner, because we have that seam allowance at every seamed corner, and I lay it a little bit differently. Okay, we're coming to this corner, and you notice the seam allowance, I'll show it before we get there, is going this direction for the top stitch. So I could have it go this direction, but it'd put a candy cane twist in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to splay it right on that stitch going that direction and lay it sort of straight. Okay, pull out my fabric here and we'll sew into that stitch, so watch. And that way that we get rid of that candy cane twist but still have reinforcement. So I'm almost into that stitch, right there I'm in the stitch, needle comes up a teeny bit, whoops, went too far, so I got to reverse it and then make sure the needle's coming up. Okay, now I pivot on the needle and I pull this fabric back this direction and work out any wrinkles, make sure that I feel just the two surfaces of fabric, and sew down this side. So that's what we do at the corners. We'll sew all around the perimeter and then show you what's next. So we did a top stitch to the top plate in the boxing, and you could do that here. If you chose to do that, you would have to open up and sew it with this right side, or with the right side out here. And you would want to lay the seam allowance down here. But this fabric is pretty stable, so we're not going to put a top stitch in there. That's your choice. So now we're going to open this up and turn it right side out. So should you ever put a top stitch in a cushion like this? Only if the weave is fairly open. If the weave is open, you might want to consider doing that. Again, because the bottom fabric is fairly stable, because it's cushion underlining fabric, we're not going to put a top stitch in the bottom side. But if you did, you would do it with the fabric out like this. And the top stitch would go in the boxing, not the bottom.
And finally, inserting the foam inside the cover.
So we're going to put our moisture prevention fabric at the bottom side of the cushion, which will help with breathability, make it cooler, and it also, if the cushion gets wet, it'll help it to breathe out or to dry out quickly. So we're going to put it in here, and then we're going to put our foam in. All right, so make sure you do the top side. The top side has the soft foam on it, and this is like wrestling alligators. I'm going to stuff it in. And I'm not going to use any silk foam or anything because we want this to breathe really well. I'm going to push it into the corners. And you do have to put your hand in here, and you do have to get the fabric because it wants to stick to the fabric a lot. So you got to finagle it until it's in there into the corner. And don't worry about your moisture prevention fabric. You can adjust that at the end if it's moving around on you. Bill's going to put his in as soon as I get... Let me get this stuffed in here more, Bill, so that you have more fabric to work with. Sometimes you just have to grab the foam and then pull the fabric into the corners. My moisture prevention fabric is up right now, but we'll get to that later. I'm just trying to get it inside. Okay, so now if I walk this up to Bill on this end, we should be able to get his end in. Two people can help with this, so we're going to stuff this in. There we go. Okay, so our job now is to roll the seam allowances to the edge and to get everything in the right position. And you'll have to sometimes get your hand back here to get everything right where it's supposed to be. So this can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes for a cushion this size. And then we'll position our moisture prevention fabric so that there are no wrinkles like there are over here. Yeah. So now we're going to move this moisture prevention fabric. As you can see, it curled to the back. I can feel it all around here. There's our wrinkle. Push it into the corner, pull it out a little bit. So we have everything in the position that we like. Our corners look good. Bill's just going to help me pull this together as we zip it down, and then we're going to make sure that the seams fall exactly where they need to as well. So we're going to zip this all the way, and when we get to the end, you get to see how the little pocket works that we designed, which is pretty cool. There we go. Actually, I don't know if it needs much adjustment. It's actually pretty beautiful the way it is.
This line you'll see, this one you won't.
Pretty nice. Let's see what the bottom side looks like. Sweet. Now we get to find out if it fits in the boat. The other one's already done, but it's done exactly in the same manner with a little bit different shape. We're not going to show that one. One's enough.
And here we are placing that cushion in the V-Berth. And as you can see, it's a nice tight fitting cushion. There is no wiggle room at all. Exactly what we desired for the finished size. Check out the description below for a full materials and tools list for the cushions that we built in this video. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell to be notified of new tutorial videos when they become available, and also give it a thumbs up if you appreciate this kind of content. I'm Eric Grant, and from all of us here at Sailrite, thanks for watching.